Work on that. 3, 2, 1. What's happening, guys? This is Logan Robinson from Here the Spear, presented to you by NoleGameDay.com. We are here live on a wonderful and beautiful Wednesday. Not in Tallahassee anymore, at least not me. Dustin, our editor-in-chief at NoleGameDay.com, is still holding it down. But I've officially moved. I'm sure Dustin is so happy about that. But if any of you have been listening to the show or watching on our live streams, kind of mentioned it a couple weeks ago before spring break happened that I'd be moving down here to go a little bit more hands-on with our Tampa Bay Buccaneers outlet, Bucs Game Day. So had a little bit of a true taste of that when we had Baker Mayfield come in here on Monday and have his introductory press conference into the organization. Go from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, Dustin. A little bit of a change here in Tampa, but still going to be hands-on with Nole Game Day and traveling up there for certain events, including the spring game and a lot of other things, including, of course, the football season ahead. So nothing much changes on that front. The show continues, but we're without VZ. He's got a meeting to go to, but that's fine. We've got a lot of football to cover in spring camp. D-Lou, good to see you again. Did you have a good spring break?
It's great to be back. And like you said, a little bit of a change here. Now I am the only Florida State insider left on the podcast. So anything I say kind of goes from here on out when it comes to practice observations. And Logan, you're just going to have to hop on the train. So
I know, and I don't know how I feel yet about that, but I will say at least whenever we are watching practices, both you and I do share notes together, and we're usually on the same page with a few players. But I will miss not being there to see Jared Verse absolutely dominate OL versus DL drills, and then also a guy, which we'll talk about soon, a couple freshmen, including Vandarius Jacobs, starting off strong in spring camp. But nothing else changes coverage-wise at NoleGameDay.com. The show will go on. We'll continue to have guests. So going to try to make this as seamless as possible as I transition down here. But as always, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. We definitely appreciate it. We've got a lot to talk about, D-Lou, since we didn't have a podcast last week. There's a variety of things, and I think what we should start off with is Florida State opening their 2024 season in Dublin, Ireland. I was driving down here, Dustin. My move-in day was last Wednesday, and notification pops up, and I'm driving, I've got my maps going. I'm like, what is happening? What's going on here? And of course that happens. And then Baker Mayfield news breaks too. So of course, I knew something like that. That's how it always happens to me. Big news breaks. Either I'm at the gym or both of us are out grocery shopping. But of course I'm moving down. But this one was huge. Florida State is going to open up their 2024 season against Georgia Tech across the seas in Dublin, Ireland. First reaction, Dustin, to that and the news.
First reaction, I mean, man, it's just kind of insane. You don't really get many of these opportunities during the college football season. I mean, literally, probably one or two games maybe are played outside of the United States per year when it comes to FBS football. And for Florida State to have it be a conference matchup in an area like that where, we heard yesterday during the press conference that Florida State held, it's going to be a sold-out stadium. They're expecting over 20,000 fans from the United States to come over, as well as, I think they said ticket buyers in 20-plus different countries. So, I mean, it really just puts Florida State on a national stage, and you got to think it's going to be coming at a good time where the trajectory of the program is currently trending upwards, and you're thinking you're going to be coming off a pretty successful 2023 season, however that turns out. And I guess what a stage for Mike Norvell and Florida State to open up 2024, the first game that this program will be without Jordan Travis.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, if you start looking into storylines all the way ahead of that, you'll be without your star quarterback. Yes, you have another season with him in 2023, but holy crap, you're going to debut a new quarterback across the seas. I mean, just as a personal side of things, I'm like, wow, how are we going to get over there? What are we going to do? What's going to happen?
My first year.
I mean, we've got to fly. Yeah. But how many, What are the beverages looking like over there? I don't know if there's anybody in the chat that have some knowledge on that, but that has to be figured out pretty quickly. I guess we have some time though, but
For a
that
guy
needs to
like
be
yourself, I think there will be plenty of beverages that you'll enjoy.
yeah, we'll have a whole itinerary set up for that, and should be a fun time. But
Yeah.
to have that kind of national coverage like that, Dustin, because this will be in week 0. We've seen a few teams before, like Northwestern play. You get that whole brand, you get your brand out there, the national stage, and then of course you also get the Ireland fans, which if you go back and look, I don't know if any of you watched the Bucks for Seahawks game, that by far I think was the loudest and most interactive, engaging stadium I've seen across the seas whenever an American football game is being played. So when I saw it being Ireland and not these other places, maybe like London, and yada yada yada, Ireland comes and represents, and they do a damn good job of coming to these sporting events. So you have a mix of Florida State fans that are going to be there that I believe they were stating during the press conference were one of the top team, the best team, or the biggest fan base to go ahead and grab those tickets or
Within a
early
week
grabs
of the game being
deposits.
announced.
Yep. So you add that in there, you add in maybe the Georgia Tech fans, but let alone FSU fans and the Ireland people. Sign me up. It seems like a phenomenal time. And, just like Mike Norvell and the rest of, that panel there at the front with Michael Alford, Florida State's athletic director, stating it's just good for the program to have this opportunity for their players. And, luckily Florida State has a lot of its fans that are not only in Tallahassee, maybe Florida, but they're everywhere across the country. And we kind of sometimes forget that just because we're so central here in Florida. But it's going to create an awesome, opportunity for a lot of guys and a lot of families, a lot of parents, everybody to go travel and see their players, see their kids play across the seas. It's a cool thing.
It's a huge opportunity. Like you said, really, these international games, they don't really happen that often. So when you have an American football game being played over in one of these countries, whether it's London or in Germany, like the Buccaneers, or now in Ireland, where some of these college football games have been held over the last couple of years. I mean, these fans really come out, show out, and go all out for these games, And I think for Florida State, it's going to be in week 0. We've already said it's going to be on a national stage. Last year, Northwestern and Nebraska nearly drew 4.5 million viewers on Fox. So, I mean, you've got to think that's going to be one of the highest rated games, if not the highest rated game, very early in the 2024 season. And with it being on such a huge stage and having these overseas fans in attendance, I mean, that could just attract more people to the Florida State fan base moving forward. And then not to mention, this game was originally scheduled to be on the road at Georgia Tech. So there's really, I don't think, any negative to taking this game. You're essentially taking away an away environment and now making it a neutral site where there's going to be a lot of energy in that stadium. And now Florida State, they're going to have 3 bye weeks, it looks like, during the 2024 season.
We've already got Tom from Facebook asking us some serious questions a ways away. But your thoughts on the game in Ireland, starting quarterback Tate Rodemaker on the field? I think that's what he's asking here. I don't know. The fun thing about this, which we're going to get a true taste of, I want to preview a little bit of the spring scrimmage coming up on Saturday, is Florida State's going to be dealing out a variety of new quarterbacks, including we had on one of our previous episodes, Luke Kromenhoek. He came on and gave us a phenomenal interview along with Camden Fryer, Florida State's 2024 wide receiver commit, legacy commit also. There's going to be a lot of quarterback questions once Jordan Travis leaves the program here after this next season. So we'll get to that whenever it comes closer, but there's going to be a lot of question marks for their first game, and let alone, that you're traveling across seas. So what a cool experience for whoever quarterback ends up starting in that game. And I do think too, just depending on Georgia Tech, we'll see how they are in 2023, but this gives you a good chance to start off your season in a strong way too, because then, we heard from Mike Norvell talking about Florida State expecting to play again on prime time on Monday night, on Labor Day night, on that Monday, and then going through and having their bye weeks. So, you're looking at a national stage 2 weeks in a row for your brand. And then if Florida State was able to capitalize and have a successful season in 2023, it just adds up to where everything makes sense. And you can see where Florida State has added a lot of personnel into that administration in the football program, and it's all head by Michael Alford, and he likes making moves. And sure enough, this was a damn good big move for Florida State and what you want to do for your brand.
They're really taking advantage of the scheduling. I mean, even when you look to last year, doing the same thing, setting up the neutral site matchup with LSU on the Labor Day weekend, doing the same thing this year with LSU. But also, you had the UF game come on a Friday night for the very first time, and that drew a ton of national attention. So I think you're just really seeing Florida State, the conference as well, working out these scheduling things and then getting Florida State in these primetime spots to put the brand on display. And I mean, to FSU's credit, it's paying off right now.
It sure is. That is for damn sure. Let's jump into. We're gonna go back a little bit because, like I said, we didn't have an episode last week. Let's go
Had to move
to.
on a Wednesday.
I know. Let's go to Jermaine Johnson's All-American brick ceremony. Dustin, you were firsthand on that. Had some phenomenal content going out on your Twitter throughout the whole weekend, but specifically this one. Mike Norvell, a really passionate speech about his former FSU defensive end star. How'd that go? We saw the content, but anything behind the scenes kind of stand out to you? It looked like I've never seen Florida State put on something like that, but I thought it was really unique that they got to do that and in front of the Moore. And if anybody knows the Moore and looking down at those bricks, those are some big bricks, some big names, I should say. And for Jermaine to be that close right there to Bobby Bowden's statue says something about him.
Yeah, like you said, I've never seen anything like that before, and it was a really cool setup and ceremony for Jermaine Johnson. Probably lasted about 20 minutes or so. You had Michael Alford come up and speak. Mike Norvell, Jameis Winston came up and spoke as well, which I thought was really cool. I mean, obviously, those two guys didn't play together at the college level, and Jameis played at FSU under a different coaching staff, but he was still able to come up there and show some support for Jermaine Johnson. Then Johnson himself came up there and spoke some words, and it was just a really cool ceremony outside of, like you said, the Moore Athletic Center. And I thought it was really well timed for Florida State, obviously being on the big Seminole Legacy recruiting weekend. So you had all of these recruits and, important figures in the Florida State football coaching staff, but also across the athletic department and alumni, people that are important to Jermaine Johnson. You had Jashawn Corbin and Keir Thomas out there, some former teammates supporting him as well. So just all of these people being there for that moment. And it was actually kind of funny. They had Jermaine Johnson. The brick was covered up with turf a little bit. So they had him get down there and cut the turf and told this story about how whenever they beat Boston College, they accidentally cut too much turf whenever they were getting stuff for the sod cemetery, with that being a road win where Florida State was the underdog going into it. So they had him get down there and cut the brick out. And yeah, like you said, I mean, right there next to the Bobby Bowden statue, it's going to be there forever. And, it's just crazy for them to have that kind of ceremony for a guy that was only here for one season. I think it really says a lot about the impact that Jermaine Johnson made in Tallahassee. And I mean, look at where the program has kind of been trending since, and especially with what they're doing on the defensive edge and everything like that. So it was a cool moment. And, Mike Norvell made it very passionate and emotional as well.
I was about to say, passionate Mike Norvell, that's nothing shocking to anybody if you're listening to any of his speeches. He doesn't need a microphone. But I think, Dustin, Jermaine Johnson is an advertisement for how well Mike Norvell evaluates players and bringing them in. And even if it is for just 1 year, how easily they can help accelerate them or utilize them in the best way possible. And also build that relationship to have someone buy in from going to an SEC program, a big SEC program, Georgia, massive right now, to come over to Florida State for a year and build that success and play a pivotal role in changing everything. I could go through a list of everything we've talked about on this podcast for years of what needed to be changed. And Jermaine Johnson, I think, is going to be one of those that put down the flag and kind of created that to help build trust for other players across the country to give Florida State and Mike Norvell a chance, to be honest with you. And I think that's what also went into a little bit of Jared versus. And now it's kind of even ridiculous to think you get another season of Jared Verse, but I think it went into a role there with Jermaine Johnson and Jared Verse and making a decision. It just goes to show that this is going to, it's going to, I don't know, kind of extend things for some transfers moving forward. But for him to make that impact in a year is ridiculous. And I like that Keir Thomas and Deshaun Corbin attended. What were they? Also transfers. So
Yep.
it just goes to show, man. It's we talk about Mike Norvell, but there's also a lot of people behind the scenes that we don't mention as much that play a major role in how this is becoming a successful trend in Tallahassee.
It's really unique what Florida State is doing. I don't think it should be taken for granted by, us or the fan base, because a lot of coaching staffs around the country aren't like this. Of course, the player development aspect has been really helpful for Florida State, but just how they connect with these guys off the field and really build those relationships. It's not all about what someone's doing on the field. No matter if you're having success or if you're struggling, those coaches are still there for you no matter what. And I feel like, you don't really get that across college football, especially in this day and age where, it's starting to be dominated by NIL and the transfer portal and all of that. So for them to have made this connection in just 1 year with Jermaine Johnson, a guy who played at Georgia and left, a year before they won a national championship. And, he was over, I think what was it, Independence Community College as well. But a guy who has played at other stops, he said that Florida State is his home, and this is the place that he's going to be coming back to over the years. So, I mean, I just feel like that says so much. And yeah, you mentioned Keir Thomas, a guy who was there for 1 year, who was only a teammate of Jermaine Johnson for 1 year, being right there to support his teammate. And I mean, the same thing with Corbin, So just a really cool moment. I think it just kind of personifies the culture that's going on at Florida State right now.
Dustin, I say we jump into a little bit of spring camp. We'll talk some observations in a minute, but I think it's worth mentioning the Micah Pittman news, him missing a large amount of time, 4 to 6 months due to a hip injury. He shared this on his YouTube channel. And, I had noticed something odd of not viewing him at tour of duty and then not seeing him at practice. And then him on his Instagram, the first day of camp, he was in Colorado, and I was like, this something's not right here. Something's a little fishy. And sure enough, we didn't get an official announcement for Florida State first. We got it from Micah Pittman himself off of his YouTube channel. But starting slot wide receiver Micah Pittman, 4 to 6 months, just depending on recovery and everything goes well. I mean, you're still looking at missing some time in the early parts of the season. And hip injuries are no joke whatsoever. I wish we had Austin on here because sure enough, he's got all the intel and details of hip injuries because he's gone through a few of those and still continuing to recover. But man, Florida State missing one of their big pieces on offense to begin at least the 2023 season.
Yeah, it's tough. Pittman said he they uncovered a tear in his labrum in his hip, but then once the actual surgery happened, they realized that it was a full tear, and it ended up being a more extensive surgery than they kind of thought going into the procedure. So I mean, you're looking at the timeline, which he mentioned was 4 to 6 months. It could potentially be at that 6 month or maybe even longer timeline, depending how long it takes to come back from that completely torn labrum, which you have to think that's a pretty stressful injury down there on the hip, especially for a wide receiver who's making a lot of cuts and things like that. So, that's a tough thing to come back from. And especially, Florida State, Pittman was huge on the punt return unit last year, a unit that had struggled in seasons prior when it came to muffing punts and just not fair catching punts, things like that. He really provided some consistency back there, and he wasn't a huge playmaker across the offense, but he still did enough to contribute in the receiving game and ended up with a career best season at FSU. So I mean, it really sucks for Pittman, a guy who's going to his final year of eligibility, and we're going to see who can step up for FSU starting right now in spring practice.
Yeah, speaking of stepping up, I think we should maybe mention a few names that can take this role. And one thing about Micah Pittman, you can play wide receiver, but his physicality and blocking, I think, is something
Mm-hmm.
that what really brought this off, what he brought to the offense and his skill sets. But I think there's a few names, Mike Norvell. We heard from him on Tuesday evening speaking about this, and maybe a few names to keep an eye out for. Some of those, including Darius Williamson, which I'm high
Darion.
on. I'm very high on. What?
Darion.
I said Darion. I said Darian Williamson.
It's not what you
Darian.
said.
What do you think I said? How could, what else could I say? Darion.
Said you sound like you said Darius.
What? Darius Williamson?
We'll
I
have
don't
to
think
we'll
so.
have to rewind
I
on
don't
that
I
one.
don't think Darius Washington's gonna be playing slot wide receiver. I hope not. But
Run it back.
yeah, no. Yeah, someone clip it and tweet us, please. But no, yeah, I think Darian is a big one here. If I understand the Winston chatter, and I think this is something we're going to talk about all throughout spring camp. I'm not sold yet at 100% of Winston Wright. I think it's going to take a little while. I think this is a good true test for spring camp, giving him a full go, and we'll see. And then the staff can evaluate after spring camp. But I'm not yet to say, boom, yeah, he's going to replace Micah Pittman's role. And Micah Pittman's role was a little bit different too. He kind of ran, he could do a lot of different things. If Winston Wright is a full go, then he brings a different variety where he can blow off the top end of a defense. So it's a different style of a player here. And then also you bring in Jaheim Bell, who is going to be utilized quite a bit in the slot too, definitely in blocking schemes. You could even use Kyle Morlock a lot. So you're going to see a variety of different guys in the slot. I think of Kentron Poitier being more of an outside guy than anything. And then I'll mention a true freshman, which we're going to talk about in just a few, with Van Javius Jacobs, a guy that can move in there, but he's going to have to put on some size because if you're in Mike Norvell's offense as a wide receiver, you've got to be able to block. If you're able to block, you're going to see more playing time. If you go back to Malik McLean, and this is where I'm going to kind of bring in Vendravius Jacobs in here. If Vendravius Jacobs wants to see playing time in 2023, he's going to have to block. And that was one of the biggest reasons why we saw Malik McLean getting so much playing time. And Vendravius Jacobs going to have to put on some size. He's got the attributes, the physical attributes to make those grabs and make the acrobatic grabs, put his body on the line type deal. But in order to be able to consistently play under Norvell and Atkins offense, you're going to have to block. So that's kind of my evaluation on what Florida State is going to have to figure out there in the slot. But I think it helps a ton where you brought in South Carolina tight end transfer Jaheim Bell.
We're going to see where it goes. I think Bell could contribute there a little bit. And when asked about it at practice yesterday, Mike Norvell specifically mentioned Darion Williamson, Ja'Kai Douglas, and Winston Wright. And important to note, all three of those guys dealt with injuries last year. Obviously, Wright missed the entire season, was able to get back, work and practice a little bit. Ja'Kai Douglas was injured in the preseason and ended up returning later on. I believe it was against Georgia Tech, but during the second half of the season. And Darion Williamson injured against Boston College while he was actually having the best performance of his career, and then was able to come back and contribute a little bit in the bowl game. So all those guys kind of getting back into the fold, hoping to have a healthy season here, starting with this spring. And, I would say out of the three of them right now, probably Winston and Darion have been the most impressive so far, but Ja'Kai Douglas might be the best route runner on the team. And I mean, that guy's extremely shifty as well. So we'll see where it goes. And I mean, true freshman Vondravius Jacobs, I'm sure we're going to get in here and talk about him in some detail. But I mean, man, that kid looks like he's got the makings of a future star. I don't want to hype him up too early on, but whenever it's been coming to these spring practices so far, I think he had his best day so far yesterday. But throughout these first couple of practices, it just seems like every rep he's doing something to make a play.
I think this is a good question here from Carroll from Facebook. So who replaces Micah Pittman at punt returner? And this is a major one. I didn't even mention this earlier, but like I said, Winston Wright, Florida State has a lot of returners that they'll go out there and practice with. But Winston Wright, Rodney Hill, redshirt freshman running back, you can try out there. I believe Andrevius Jacobs also getting a chance there at punt return, Dustin, during practice.
Yeah, I was trying to pull it up.
I know. I'm trying to think of maybe who else can fit that role.
Yeah, it seems like early on, Andrevius Jacobs and Winston Wright have been taking a lot of reps when it comes to fielding punts. But then I also think a guy like Ja'Kai can fit back there. Maybe someone like Rodney Hill or Keisaiah Holmes. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's probably better to have, I would say, a veteran back there more than a true freshman, particularly with what we've seen over the last couple of years on Florida State's punt return unit. So it's going to be tough to replace Pittman because, I mean, you have to think about it. He was very solid, averaged almost 10 yards per return, and I don't think he muffed a punt the entire season. I mean, I can't remember one. I can still remember the punt that it was either Keyshawn Helton or Ontario Wilson muffed against UF and the regular season finale in 2021. So I can't remember Pittman dropping one last year.
I don't either. I don't either. The chat will certainly tell us.
He just brought the stability that they didn't have in years. So, I mean, that's going to be a tough battle to replace him, and I think Florida State knows it's really important. And we also need to mention, depending on how his recovery goes with that 4 to 6 timeline that he personally set during his YouTube video, that puts him back August to October. So, I mean, potentially, on the high end of things, if the rehab goes really well, he doesn't miss any time and he's able to get back before Florida State plays their first game. Or if it goes a little bit longer than expected, he's back, by about a third of the season or so.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish Micah all the best, and we'll be, I guess, tuned to his YouTube. I mean, that's a good way of gaining.
Yeah, I wonder.
I have to set the notifications on now. I'm getting the news from Micah left and right and everything. It's no longer from Florida State.
About that one.
The notifications are now on for Micah Pittman's YouTube. So, but yeah, wish him the best for a full recovery there. And we'll see if we get any update further after spring camp, but not expecting anything really extensive anytime soon.
Yeah. And I think the good thing about Pittman is he found a doctor that specializes in that type of surgery and has performed it on professional athletes and guys that have played in the NFL before. So, I mean, he put himself in the best position possible, and we'll kind of see where things start to progress from here over the next couple of months.
All right, let's jump into spring camp observations. Florida State returned to the practice fields on Tuesday afternoon after a nice spring camp. Listening to Mike Norvell's interview, seemed pretty pleased, but kind of wanted to see a little bit more tempo. And that's expected. You're coming back. You're getting a little bit – you got to get acclimated back to, real life and everything. I saw a lot of guys traveling and enjoying it, as they should. I would too if I'm going through these camps and everything and how straining it looks. I think they should have some time to go enjoy themselves, but it seems like everybody made it back healthy, which is the biggest thing. But yeah, a little maybe one step behind on the tempo side of things, but he did enjoy seeing the physicality that the guys brought. What kind of stood out to you? I know there's a few names, and I know we'll want to talk about Andrevius Jacobs, maybe some Morlock in there too. But overall theme, did anything look different to you, Dustin, from what we saw in the first week?
Not too much different. I would just say a lot of enthusiasm for the guys to get back out there on the field. I thought it was a pretty physical practice overall. But like you said, Norvell wasn't really happy with the speed of things at some times, and he also wasn't happy with how some players finished after the play, which, that's a common theme that we've seen early in camp. So I think with them having that break and then getting back out there, he just wanted to be a little extra hard on those guys, get them back in the football mindset, especially with only one practice remaining on Thursday afternoon before Florida State has their first scrimmage of the spring on Saturday, which is going to be an opportunity for some of these guys, the 19 newcomers, to get their real first taste of competition at Florida State. I mean, you see the team drills during practice, but they're going to amp it up a lot more on Saturday, put guys in certain spots and test them out. That'll be the first chance for some guys to start maybe getting a leg up on different position battles. So I think Norvell's just trying to turn the intensity up just a little bit to get these guys rolling.
Yeah, we see Mike Norvell, and whenever he's yelling, it's usually just because they did not finish the play. And even if you fall or you go out of bounds, you still got to run that extra 20 yards to finish it off. So that's just something that we've seen since day one of him arriving here in Tallahassee. A few names to note, and one of our practice reports was Vandravius Jacobs, who continues to shine, making plays left and right. I had noticed him, both of us had in the first couple of practices, and it seems like he's keeping a consistent trend. Mike Norvell talking about him after practice, saying, he's doing very well. There's going to be times, though, where he's going to have his hiccups, and he's going to be like, yeah, this is college football. Things are going to be a little bit different, getting adjusted to this, getting the playbook down, getting used to practices, like, consistently. That's something that Jacobs is going to have to do. But for him to keep this up and keep making plays against really good competition, I do like that Mike Norvell will have this where you have newcomers, you'll have true freshmen go against your veterans. And for him to make some plays against one of your biggest transfers that came into this class, Virginia cornerback transfer, Fentrell Cypress, making a grab on him, I think it just goes to show that Vandravius is here to compete, man. He's here to get better. And I think that he is feeding off of Mike Norvell's kind of work ethic, how things are going, how practices are flowing, and it's fitting well between both of them. But specifically, I just like enjoying this part of spring where you see young guys, definitely true freshmen coming in, early enrollees, going to battle with some veterans. And I'm all about it. But that kid is special. Being able to watch him in person, definitely before he even arrived at Florida State, seeing him at the elite camp this last summer, I was like, who is that? I mean, he was giving every DB problems, Dustin.
There are definitely some steps to be made, but coming out of the gate, I mean, there's no question that Vandravius Jacobs isn't blinking at, jumping up a level of competition. Like you said, going right at Fentrell Cypress a couple of times. And as I was saying earlier, I mean, it just seems like every rep, especially the last couple of practices, whenever he steps up there, he's going out there to make a play. And I mean, whether that's getting a step on somebody on a route or like we saw yesterday, one of the quarterbacks went deep and Jacobs had the presence of mind to come back to the football, grab it over a defensive back, and then take it for what would be a touchdown in a game scenario. So he's just coming in as, I think he's a little bit maybe more polished right now than some other wide receivers that have come in as true freshmen. And I think that goes to show what he did at the high school level. One of the best in the state of Florida, one of the best in the country last year, almost 1,600 receiving yards, 21 receiving touchdowns for Vero Beach High School in 2022 as a senior. So, I mean, he's kind of proven it with his production at the high school level that he's already got a lot of these technical aspects as a receiver down. And he's still got some refining to do, honing in on certain things. And like you said, gaining weight. Haven't really seen him much as a blocker yet, so that'll be an aspect to watch moving forward. Because, like Logan said earlier, that is a big aspect of this offense. The wide receivers, they've got to block, and that sets up a lot of big plays for Florida State in the passing game and also in the running game as well. So we'll see how that goes. Because size-wise, he's technically the smallest receiver on the roster, about 175 pounds or so. But I mean, this kid is a playmaker, and if he keeps doing this throughout the entirety of spring camp, it's going to be hard to not give him some type of role in 2022 or 2023. Sorry.
I'll be honest with you. You got an offensive young guy making the plays, and then also on Tuesday, a defensive player, young guy, KJ Kirkland, which KJ Kirkland doesn't look like a younger player whenever he walks by going into practice and seeing him out there going against the wide receiver units. He doesn't look like a true freshman just because of his size and length that he brings. He's one of the guys early on in the first week where I had to continue to look at my FSU roster sheet and say, who was that number and wearing that and making plays out there, definitely specifically in one-on-ones. But Dustin, take us through, you put in the practice report a pick six that he brought, but can you run us through that play that he made for him to be making these plays kind of early on is something impressive. But he's someone that has flashed in front of my eyes throughout the last 4 practices. But for him to make a big play like that in Splash on Tuesday has my eyes looking a little bit closer to him, I will say.
He's another true freshman that's been really strong for Florida State early on in the spring, and yesterday getting that pick six, Florida State. So just kind of set the picture, I guess, a little bit. Early on in practice, Florida State runs a 2-minute type of tempo drill where basically it's 11 on 11 offense versus defense, and it's kind of like they try to drive quickly down the field and hurry up offense type of thing. So they were going through that. Tate Rodemaker was in at quarterback, and he was looking to throw deep, and I think he just missed Kirkland for whatever reason. So Kirkland made a play on the ball, picked it off, and just took it the distance. And you had the entire defense running down there. You had Mike Norvell running down there. I mean, it was a pretty cool moment to see. And then also later on in the practice, fellow true freshman Quindarius Jones came away with an interception of his own that it might have been a pick six. I couldn't quite tell, but I mean, regardless, both of those two guys, and along with Jacobs, I would say those are 3 freshmen that are really asserting themselves out of the gate. And I mean, making some plays in that, for Quindarius Jones and for KJ Kirkland, making some plays in that defensive secondary, and Jacobs on the other side of the ball, making plays deep down the field, over the middle. I mean, they've both, all 3 of them have looked pretty good early on. And, I think that just goes to show Florida State didn't have the highest ranked high school recruiting class, and some of that can go to the number of guys they took. But when you look at the guys that they are bringing in, I mean, they look like quality players out of the gate. I mean, that's not even talking about Brock Glenn, who I believe might be the only quarterback that hasn't thrown an interception so far in spring camp. I'll have to check my notes. And Lucas Simmons, already the tallest player on the team, is starting to look the part. Needs to fill out a little bit, add some more weight, but he's starting to look the part. So, I mean, some of these true freshmen, they came in ready to work.
I was going to say, going back to that elite camp, Dustin, the one player that was giving Vandrevius Jacobs fits was Quindarius Jones.
Yep, and he got the offer
much later. Yeah, I was about to say, not much later, who got offered? Quindarius Jones did. And I think that's just evaluating good on good. And for Vandrevius Jacobs to go against him and have some trouble here and there with Quindarius Jones, it kind of created a quick evaluation. Yeah. Vandrevius Jacobs is good. If he's having some fits with Jones, then we might need to take a look at this guy, maybe send out an offer. So it's cool kind of seeing these things in the timeline and them develop, and seeing them now on the practice field, them going at it with each other and making plays is great to see. But it shows there might be some good evaluations that the staff has made early on.
That's an important one to note, because Jones got the offer that day and didn't publicly report another offer throughout the course of his recruitment. That had some Florida State fans wondering in the last couple of weeks leading up to the early signing period, like, well, is this guy any good? Why doesn't he have any offers? Is there some type of problem? It even had me like asking around, like, is he going to be able to academically qualify? And I mean, there were no issues. This was just a guy that Florida State got on campus, like you said, Logan, saw him participate in that camp and really liked what they saw, took his commitment about a month later. So after they extended the scholarship offer to him. And I mean, now you're seeing it early on, what Florida State saw last summer. And I mean, it's really paying off, some of these evaluations that the staff has made. And I mean, it even goes to a guy like Brian Courtney, someone who was a quarterback in high school, a tight end now, who is really starting to grow up during his second year on campus. So it's going to be interesting as some of these evaluations begin to come to fruition.
Dustin, can you give us some, I know it's only been one practice I haven't been in attendance for, but Jaheim Bell on Tuesday, there's a question here from Anthony asking, do you guys see Jaheim Bell playing an even bigger role because of his skill set with the absence of Pittman? And we kind of touched on this earlier on in the show of who's going to be playing a slot a lot, and Jaheim Bell will be stretched out there quite a bit. Shoot, he could be stretched out there to the outside. That's just kind of how dynamic in the talent set that Jaheim Bell will bring to an offense. Definitely just thinking about what Mike Norvell can do with him. But What did he look like on Tuesday? I know Kyle Morlock also had a good day. I'll be honest with you. The day that I left, the tight end room had. We've never talked about a tight end room having the day. You know, we've never
that was
done
the
that.
Wednesday.
Yeah, we've never talked about a tight end room like making a splash. Yeah, maybe here and there. Okay, cool. You know, Cam McDonald making a play. You know, Marquise and Douglas, but Jaheim Bell, what did he look like on Tuesday? Did he look like he had a fun spring break, or did he come back ready to work?
He's been looking solid. I don't think any complaints so far, and he's a guy that we expect. We said it before, to work in the slot, work at tight end, work in the backfield. Florida State just kind of going to use him a little bit as a gadget type of player. So I don't think with Pittman going down, it necessarily changes that anything that they were going to do with Bell anyway. But I will say, it's just been kind of impressive watching him work so far, because linebackers struggle to guard the guy. He's a little bit too big, too thick for safeties to really guard him if he gets an angle on them. And also yesterday, I mean, he was getting some praise for his blocking and some drills, some positional drills against the defensive line while working with the offensive line. So, he's really been transitioning well for Florida State. And then Kyle Morlock, I mean, he's one of 4 guys I've gotten written down here that have stood out the most during spring camp to this point. I mean, we were kind of I think he dropped a pass early on the Friday practice whenever Logan was heading out, and we were kind of making a joke about it. But then after that, I mean, he just started making play after play after play, and like every pass that went his way, I mean, whether it was a diving effort or a one-handed effort, it was like he was catching. It was like, Jesus. And then it came out yesterday and did the exact same thing. I mean, it just seems like every rep, Kyle Morlock, if the ball comes his way, he's find a way to get in position and make a catch. And, if he's not diving to the ground to go grab that ball, he's grabbing it and getting upfield for a big play. So, I mean, it looks like Florida State has a hit right there. And I've got to mention Marquise and Douglas as well, because he's another guy where you're not seeing a ton of huge plays, but whenever the ball gets in his hands, he's catching it and he's making something happen. So those 3 guys in the tight end room, it could really revolutionize what Florida State's been doing the last couple of years at that position.
I was gonna say Marquise and Douglas is one of Jordan Travis's favorite go-tos. To be honest with you, he likes going to back because I think it is the consistency. Dustin, he will hold on to the ball, he'll catch it, and going back, Cam would have his moments here and there with some inconsistencies and in games. And, Jordan wants to go to someone, definitely, if he can just go to his comfort zone down below at the first level and find his tight end, and that's where he's going to go to. So, and plus, he's not the easiest guy to take down. I think that's something Florida State and Coach Thomason are going to be working on him with. Once you get that ball in your hand, keep your body up. Because he can use that size, but I'd like to see him maybe drop that shoulder a little bit more. He likes to run tall a little bit. I want to see him drop the shoulder a tiny little bit. I mean, he is a big size dude, and that's, I'm trying to tell a big monster to do something. Although his nickname is Biscuits, so it seems a little bit sweeter. But nonetheless, I do not want to get in front of Marquise and Douglas. So, but definitely, if he's dropping that shoulder, I can go and say, night, I'm done. I'm put to bed. I'm not going to try that ever again. And I think that's something Marquiston should do more. Anything else worth mentioning from Tuesday's practice, D-Lou? I know there was some recruits in attendance, including Camden Fryer, Florida State's legacy wide receiver commit. Anything else?
I would just say for me, specifically from Tuesday, we saw Fentrell Cypress get in on the turnover party. He was able to pull down an interception. And then Jerrion Jones as well, a veteran who's been around the program for a while. Jones coming out pretty strong during this fall camp. He's looked really good through the first couple of practices, and obviously going to be tested with a guy like Cypress coming into that defensive backfield. And I wanted to say Jared Verse. We haven't really talked about him much this spring camp. I think maybe now that we've seen him for a year, you can start to almost take what he does for granted. But this is a guy, it feels like he's beginning to elevate his play to another level. Obviously, coming off a season where he dealt with some injuries, wasn't 100% for probably over 50% of that season ever since he took that hit in that game against Louisville on that Friday night in September. Went through the rest of the season, wasn't able to fully practice, according to JP. Whenever we spoke to him before spring camp, jumped off, but the last couple of days, he's setting the tone before practice, coming in, talking to guys like we've seen in the past, and then on the field, I mean, just making it look absolutely easy at times. I mean, Jared Verse, you can tell that he's coming back not to play around. He's really coming back to do something. And you have to think if this guy is healthier than he was last season, I mean, the sky is the limit for what he could do on the field for FSU.
Jared Verse. It was around this time last year, Dustin. We got our first true taste of what he brings to a defense and just specifically one-on-ones and what he brings before you even get to practice. He's very, I don't know, he brings a lot of energy that I think this team needed last year, and it kind of grew him up a little bit because he is going to trash talk you. He's going to chirp you. And we see it every day at practice whenever he's going against his one-on-ones, going against his tackles. He will talk trash to not only that player, but the entire offensive line. But like he said, and Mike Norvell said, once they get off that practice field, it's, it changes. And it's not the same Jared Verse that it is whenever the helmet is on the field. And, Jared, I love that kid, love his tenacity. He was one of a really good interview. He was, when he was driving, I remember that interview that we had with him while he was on his way. He was driving. But gave us some time, and you could just tell from his voice, Dustin, he's got a lot of confidence, and I was really excited to see how that was going to mingle and how that was going to work, transitioning into a bigger program, a big brand, a big program at Florida State, and he was able to do that just off of bringing that work ethic, but also being a good teammate off the field. And if you look at anybody's, socials on the team players, his teammates, they're all around him. They're surrounding him. They love that guy. And it's football. Things are going to get chippy. That's how it goes. There's going to be some trash talking, but it seems like he keeps that kind of conserved just to the practice field, and then off the field, things a little bit more laid back. So it just still fathoms me, and I don't think we really stress it enough that you have another Jared Verse season ahead. And if he's fully healthy, and if you can have a fully healthy Jared Verse season, unlike you did last year, I don't know, man.
It's game changing. But I will say, I think my overall top player right now through the first third or so of spring camp, Miami defensive tackle transfer, Darrell Jackson, especially whenever the pads came on last Friday. I mean, dude absolutely dominated. Position drills, one-on-ones, whatever they're doing, team drills, anything, water breaks. I mean, dude is just absolutely dominating, especially whenever he's matched up one-on-one with somebody, whether it's plugging a gap in the defense, working backside to make a tackle on a running back that's working up to the second level. He's just been extremely impressive, especially for a guy who's 6'5", nearly 330 pounds. For him to move like that, it's not quite fair. And we saw it continue on Tuesday yesterday. He's going to be someone that makes a big impact on that defense, along with Fabian Lovett, who's been doing Fabian Lovett type of things. Another guy that maybe when we're watching practice, you can kind of take for granted what he does because we've been seeing it now for so long. We're just used to it, And then you look at Fisk. He looks pretty quick. We saw one of those videos. Tommy had it for us, but running down with Coach Norvell, beating him in the race. I think Coach Norvell called him Captain Green Jersey or something like that. But regardless, that dude has some speed. Obviously not a full go at the moment, but whenever he is able to get involved, it's going to be really interesting. Florida State, a lot of talent right there on the interior of the defensive line.
Yeah, before I bring up that quarterback question, Tom's asking here about how's Fisk looking. Just like you said, Dustin, he was running full speed, still limited in some contact things, and Norvell's told us that. But it was funny after that race and after the practice, Norvell saying, I also had a pretty eventful spring break. I was running around with my daughter, so legs a little strained, but he did say Thursday's practice, tomorrow's practice, he's going to take on Fisk, and we'll see who ends up winning that race. That could be the big thing now in practice, is who's going to beat or who's going to win against.
You got a lot of guys running now. It's like up to 6 or 7.
And these are the big boys. I think it's funny because I know, we're there to watch it. And so if you're fans, they're running to their drill spot where Odell Hagens takes them all the way down the field, and they're doing practices and drills, warm-ups in the end zone to start off practice. So the big boys are the only ones running here. And I think that maybe the thinnest here is maybe Dante Anderson and Byron Turner, but those are still big boys. But to see Fisk, you see Joshua Farmer running with them, it's fun to watch. But to see Fisk moving like that just shows his athletic ability.
And maybe
there's a question.
Oh, okay.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say
you're going to join in.
Maybe even better than that when it comes to Fisk, because he's not even a full go right now, and you already have guys like Fabian Lovett, who spoke after practice a couple weeks ago, and then yesterday Joshua Farmer speaking after practice. You got both of those guys singling out Fisk and talking about him and being excited about what he's going to bring to the room.
Yeah, I remember asking Fabian Lovett about Fisk and getting to know him, and he said he just had a huge smile on his face and said, he's good people. We have a great relationship, and I think that says something early on. And this should no longer be a shocker, because Norvell does a really good job of evaluating guys off the field before even getting to on the field. But those two already have a really good relationship, it seems. There's a question on here from YouTube asking, how's that quarterback 2 battle looking from your view? Sorry if it's already covered. Go Noles. And I think this one, Dustin, you and I will agree on, not necessarily a battle, but it's more of looking at AJ Duffy and Brock Glenn and seeing how much they can push to get to Tate Rodemaker's level. Because right now, you got your QB1 and you got your QB2. And to me, is set in stone this spring. We got to see Tate Rodemaker play this last season. We won't go too in depth here on it, but you're really looking to see AJ Duffy take that next step. And really, I think it's more of a mental game for him. Mike Norvell called him one of the smartest players, definitely looking at the film room. Tony Tokars, we've had him on the show. He's talked highly of Duffy, but really, I think it really is the mindset for Duffy. And we saw a switch and a change there near the latter half of the season. And I think now with having Brock Glenn come in and the perseverance and attitude, the confidence to the leadership abilities that Brock Glenn has brought pretty early on into this camp is pushing AJ Duffy. And that's exactly what you want to have on a football team. Definitely if you're trying to grow some younger players, Dustin.
You pretty much nailed it. I think it's going to take something to unseat Tate Rodemaker as that backup to Jordan Travis, just because of what he showed us last year with what he was able to do on the road, leading Florida State to that comeback victory against Louisville. So right now it's really about, is AJ Duffy going to start blossoming a little bit going into his second year in the system, second year at Florida State. He's already gone through spring practice before, and he's done all of these things. So now doing it again, is he going to be able to elevate his level of play? And I think, it says a lot during the tour of duty. He's really coming into the spring camp in excellent shape, in my opinion. I've been impressed with what he's done physically in the tour of duty and very early on in camp. And some of the strides are there, but I think it's just more about getting it down consistently, making the right reads, making the right throws, doing things the right way. And I think that's what Norvell wants to see too. And as it goes for Brock Glenn, like you said, I mean, he's really bringing a mindset. Seems like a guy who's mature beyond his years, and getting him in early, especially at this point, with Duffy coming into his second year. I think it's huge as those two guys kind of push each other and fight for the future. Because I mean, when you look at it, who knows once Jordan Travis moves on from Florida State, is it going to be Tate Rodemaker? Is it going to be AJ Duffy, Brock Glenn, obviously here now, and then you're going to have Luke Kromenhoek in the future? I mean, that's a loaded quarterback room, and I think it's going to be big this year because we all know Jordan Travis is going to be the entrenched starter for FSU unless, something happens like an injury or that. So that really gives Florida State an opportunity to evaluate these guys, put them in different scenarios, test them out to see who is going to be the signal caller for the future once Jordan Travis, who, I mean, man, might end up being the best quarterback in the history of Florida State once he moves on.
Ooh, my goodness. Watch out. You might get clipped on that one, Dustin. Make sure you stay like stats-wise.
Pull up the stats.
Yeah, you got to go off the stats wise because you're about to have the Charlie Ward and the Jameis Winstoners coming after you.
We'll see what happens in 2023, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see
Banking
if he
on
makes it. If he makes it to that Heisman ceremony, a whole discussion is created. We will have a full-on podcast about.
But he can't do it right. He doesn't have a W in his last name.
That is true. Like, what do you do? Like that whole theme changes a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening here. One last thing here, because I want to go through all these questions. We haven't been on here in a week, so I want to go through these. This is from Ira Tech on YouTube asking, how's the offensive line looking? Just from what my evaluations were in camp. There's some guys still recovering from injuries. There's also some shuffling going on. There is also newcomers going on. And then I think the biggest part is you add in Florida State's defensive line, which we were harping on earlier. It's taken a little while maybe to adjust, but I think I don't really want to evaluate too fully on this offensive line play until maybe after this first spring scrimmage or even the second one, honestly. I might just wait until fall, to be honest with you. I don't think it's too right of us to extensively give our grades on the offensive line at the moment. I know there's talent there. There's definitely bigger size, and I think there's development still being worked on with some of the newcomers from even last year. But, you have the talent. It's just what Coach Atkins is going to do with that unit, and that's going to play the biggest part, Dustin. But right now, yeah, that defensive line is able to dominate. But I think we also need to add in this line isn't fully healthy, and there's also you're missing a few pieces. If you think about Robert Scott too, you're missing some guys in this room. But this is why you went into the transfer portal and brought in some talent.
Yeah, Robert Scott obviously out for spring practice for Florida State. And I wouldn't say the offensive line is getting dominated. The defensive line has been dominant at times, but I mean, you're still seeing positive signs from guys across the offensive line. And I mean, heck, Jeremiah Byers might have already asserted himself as the best offensive lineman on the team. It really seems like wherever he ends up fitting in, whether it's right guard or right tackle, he's going to be a stalwart for Florida State. And then same thing with Casey Roddick, a guy who's been coming on a little bit. He can move really well for a guy his size. Seeing it a little bit when Florida State runs some screens or things like that, we were getting the offensive lineman out in space, and it seems like he could really be utilized on those type of plays and those type of packages for Florida State. And that's another guy, kind of shuffling around a little bit. He can play either the guard spots, he can play at center. It's kind of just where are you going to fit the best.
Absolutely. Let's jump into some other things here, Dustin. I had noted on our docket here that we should probably go through maybe a few preview little notes on Florida State's scrimmage that they're going to be holding, and then we'll go into some recruiting just to finish it off. Dustin, Florida State will hold their first spring scrimmage on Saturday. A little bit, a couple hours before noon. We'll be hearing from Mike Norvell, players, I'm sure, also coaches. We did that last year, so we'll be hearing from them afterwards, which will be good because we will not be able to be there. It would be nice for us to view some spring scrimmages.
Scrimmage.
Yeah, the only good thing about spring or the COVID time was that we could go into Doak and watch those scrimmages, and we got to tell you about a few players like Malik McLean, who was getting a lot of early playing time. That was a shocker to us just because of the true freshman getting that amount of reps early on. But I think, looking at what Mike Norvell said yesterday, talking about Jordan Travis not getting a lot of playing time, he'll get maybe a few reps, probably like they did last year. He got like a series, maybe a max of 2, but it seems like they're not going to run him a whole ton. They're specifically looking at some of these younger quarterbacks like AJ Duffy, and then of course Brock Glenn. Tate Rodemaker is going to jump in there too. But those two guys, your QB1, QB2, going to get some rest, and then going to allow a lot of these younger guys to jump in. That's kind of how it is in first spring scrimmages, anyways. But that, I think, like we were talking about earlier, those two guys need it the most, and so does a lot of those other skill players. And then we were talking about the offensive line. It's just, I think this is a big newcomer party. I don't think you'll see a lot of Fabian Lovett. I don't think that you'll see a whole ton of Maurice Smith. I think there's just a lot of different pieces that Coach Atkins is going to do on the offensive line to test a few things. And also Coach Surtain, in his first year as a defensive back coach, he's going to have a good test and a good look at what his defensive backs are going to bring to the field, both at the cornerback position, nickel, your safeties, who's going to fit best, who's being able to go against some of the top competition. It's just kind of like a little teaser before that second scrimmage, in my opinion.
I think that's the luxury of having a veteran-laden team. I mean, you've got so many guys that have been in this program for years who are either big contributors or starters or stars. I mean, when you look at Jordan Travis and Fabian Lovett, and it kind of gives Florida State this luxury. Like, we know what these guys bring. They've been bringing it for years in this system under this coaching staff, and you don't have to stress them as much during these periods. And then you can go deeper into your roster a little bit. Like you said, with some of the younger guys, even some veterans that, are still pushing for spots and playing time and things like that, and focus on them in these type of scrimmages. And I think, that could be a huge thing for Florida State moving forward in this spring, because it allows you to keep these veterans healthy, and it also allows you to test these other guys in an extremely competitive setting. So, I mean, a guy like Vondravius Jacobs, for instance, who's been making these plays in position drills and one-on-ones and 7-on-7s, when you put him out there in a competitive setting and 11-on-11, full contact, the music's blaring and dope, they've got the crowd noise turned up. Is he still going to be that playmaker that he is out there on Tuesday and Thursday? We're going to see. And I think it's a big opportunity. You mentioned Coach Surtain. The Florida State's coaching staff, they take these things very seriously. I mean, this is a game-like simulation. They're all going to have the headsets on. They're going to be, communicating. They're going to have the signals and stuff. So, I mean, it's also getting him in a game-like situation for the first time, working with Adam Fuller over the headset, working with these players in these situations, third down, red zone, whatever they're doing. So I think it's big for a new coaching addition as well as for these players as well.
I'm glad Navy Knoll, our guy from Discord in here, is asking this question. How do our safeties look? And we'll finish this off on some spring camp stuff, and we'll jump into recruiting to finish off this stream. Travis J, I want to start off with first.
Yep. Got to.
That was my risk it for a biscuit guy. I said, I'm going to name one dude that I think maybe has a chance to turn some things around. Travis J has been working with the ones. We can say that. That's out there. That's fine. Travis J is kind of bought in fully in a lot of different ways. And I go back to even last season where he bought in because he didn't have playing time, didn't see the field and could have easily hit the transfer portal, but he stayed in. And I think hearing from a lot of the transfers coming in along with the newcomers, noting Travis as being the guy leading him into the university, showing him around campus, getting him adjusted to academics, how practices are going to go. Hearing that from a lot of the newcomers kind of early on told me, man, Travis J is looking to turn things around here. And now he's working at the safety position back, kind of where things all began for him a little bit. He moved the corner a little bit, moved back to safety. Now Florida State and Coach Surtain keeping him at that safety position. He's looked pretty good. And we've always known he's a thumper. I saw in your report noting, he came down and popped Rodney Hill. But, this would be huge for Florida State if Travis J can get things clicking and that defense, in my opinion, because then you're looking at Akeem Dent, who has probably the most experience, definitely playing time in that safety room. And then you add in a young star with Shyheim Brown, Dustin. You're looking at a really nice safety room if definitely Akeem Dent can go back to being fully healthy. Shyheim Brown returns and good to go. And then Travis J, things all circle around, and a phenomenal storyline is set for him in this 2023 season. But just early on, though, it's great to see that. And then you also have Amorion Cooper.
Yep.
But just specifically Dustin. Yeah, specifically Dustin. What about Travis J? I mean, it could be a really cool story. It's so early. I know it's so early. I'm buying into things kind of early on here, but I just really like the attitude and the emphasis on buying in early from him.
I'm with you. It could end up being a really cool story because, I mean, you can't write off the type of potential that Travis Jay has with the athleticism that he presents. And obviously, a guy that's kind of flipped between safety and corner during his time at FSU has had some struggles off the field. Wasn't able to suit up last year. You kind of went into it, but just for him to stick with the team, eventually be able to suit up, didn't play, but be able to be on the sidelines dressed out with his teammates for the Cheez It Bowl against Oklahoma and sticking with Florida State despite, some stuff that he went through. I think it says a lot about him, his character and now where he's at as far as being bought in to Florida State and this coaching staff, so it's going to be fun to watch. I like what I've seen out of him early on, and I mean that dates back to what we saw at Tour of Duty when he was the guy that was at the back of the line whenever someone finished a rep and they were leaning over tired or something like that. Travis Jay was going over there and picking them up, providing encouragement. So it's really been impressive to see, what he's doing on the field, but also off the field, stepping up as a leader in this program, with all that he's dealt with during his career at FSU. So it's going to be cool to see where it goes from here. And yeah, Amarian Cooper has looked pretty solid at times for Florida State. I think Quindarius Jones and KJ Kirkland both, fit in very well at safety. I think both of them are going to end up fitting at safety full time throughout their careers at Florida State. I mean, we'll see how it goes, but they both got the playmaking ability, the body type to kind of man that back end. And Shaheem Brown, still seeing some flashes there. Want to see it a little bit more consistently, but I think early on, we're only 4 practices in, but I think Coach Surtain has to like what he's seeing from his secondary, especially creating 4 turnovers on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I like this mention here on YouTube from our guy, Mr. Two First Names, saying Travis Jay got to watch Jamie up close last season. Has to have had made an impact. And I'll be honest with you, I think that's a really good point there. A lot of ways that Jamie Robinson was dropped down onto the line. And we know Travis Jay's physicality. We saw that in Madison County. He's not afraid to come down and lay the wood, but, there's some certain things that he's got to take care of too. And coverage. And that was one of his biggest inconsistencies. If that can be cleaned up, and then if Florida State can find a way to utilize him kind of with how Jamie was last season, I really liked how Adam Fuller would use him in some games, definitely in the red zone, because his versatility was huge. And Travis Jay has that. He's one of the most athletic players on this roster for Florida State going into 2023. So we'll see, and continue to see what happens. But I would not be shocked to see after these next couple of scrimmages that Travis Jay's name is not mentioned. And that might be one of the things I'll ask Adam Fuller or even Norvell Saturday afternoon after that concludes. Let's jump into some recruiting, Dustin, to finish off this episode of Hear the Spear. I had stated before, a few guys visiting practices, a pretty busy week overall. I saw there's a Michigan State defensive back, current commit, that is visiting. He was decked out in Florida State gear. Maybe something to watch here. You don't usually see that as much anymore, I don't think. But any latest on the recruiting side of things, D-Lou?
Yeah, been a minute. So, I mean, we kind of have to jump all the way back to the Seminole Legacy weekend where Florida State, 11 5-star prospects on campus, ranging from the 2024 class to the 2025 class. I think probably one of the biggest developments coming out of it was from 5-star running back Cam Davis, who's been committed to Florida State for over 2 years at this point. Obviously, a lot of schools in the country are trying to get him on campus for visits and to try and flip his commitment from Florida State. But coming out of the trip, Cam Davis said that he's in the process of shutting down his recruitment. He considered taking visits to other schools. Actually had talked about a official visit to Colorado whenever we spoke to him in February, but said after doing some thinking and sitting down with his family, he decided it was just too late in the process for other schools to have a chance at him. So we'll see how that goes moving forward. But right now it seems like Cam Davis completely locked in with Florida State. Then moving on, 4-star offensive lineman Jason Zandamela, kind of going to go here bullet through bullet, make it a little quick. But 4-star offensive lineman Jason Zandamela, Florida State has taken the lead, and it seems like a significant favorite and that recruitment he's planning on committing in the summer. But I think right now it'd be a shock if he doesn't end up in the class. Florida State's coaching staff also really likes him a lot, probably the top center prospect on the board. 5-star cornerback Charles Lester, big target that we've been talking about for a while on the show, said coming out of the trip he nearly committed to Florida State while he was on campus on Friday watching practice, was able to meet and speak with Jameis Winston for a little bit, and it seems pretty clear. Florida State has the lead in this recruitment. Wouldn't be a surprise to me if maybe he's even a silent commit right now, but it only matters whenever those things go public. So we'll see when that happens, if it happens, for Lester.
I wanted to note on that, Jameis Winston meeting him. Mike Norvell specifically brought Lester over to Jameis.
I'm sure, yeah.
I was right there next to him. And Jameis, one of the first things he said was, "You're a DB?" Because Charles Lester isn't a small dude. He's definitely got the tall length on him. He's one of those taller cornerbacks. But Jameis Winston, very impressed with his size, and they chopped it up for about 5 minutes. And Mike Norvell left immediately once he brought him over there and let those two guys get to know one another. But that's one of the perks of having a guy like Jameis Winston be at the practices. And then you've also got some former Noles like Jermaine Johnson too, just chopping it up with a few recruits. It's it's just how it goes. That's what Florida State should do, and they're working to do that and build the relationships with some of their biggest former stars that Mike Norvell didn't coach, and getting them on campus, trying to do more of that is something that has taken a little while. But I think once you get some of these former guys, some of these former stars on campus, it's hard not to maybe believe or at least buy into what Mike Norvell's trying to do.
Yeah, another Florida State quarterback, I guess a future Florida State quarterback they had around Charles Lester a lot. Luke Kromenhoek doing some recruiting in Tallahassee for the Seminole Legacy recruiting event. And he was also there talking with Jason Zandamela at practice. So, Kromenhoek, like he said, whenever he came on here, really trying to do his part, taking a leadership role in this class. And, trying to boost it as far as he can. And, yeah, moving down the list, 4-star safety Travaris Banks, been at Florida State a couple of times this offseason. Another guy, Florida State, right in the mix here. They're going to get an OV, it sounds like, during the summer before Banks makes a commitment. No date yet, but, that's one that Florida State really pushing for him at this time. Then moving over to the 2025 class, 5-star tight end Elias Williams, named Florida State his leader coming out of the weekend, which, is huge. This guy's 6'8", 220, 230 pounds, going to be an absolute freak in that 2025 class. Another 2025 5-star prospect, wide receiver, Caleb Cunningham out of Mississippi, also named Florida State his leader. Now you got to remember Mississippi. Florida State hasn't had the best luck there on the recruiting trail over the last couple of years, to say the least. So we'll see how that one goes. But just seeing all these blue chip prospects give rave reviews of Florida State, and even naming them the leader at certain points of their recruitment is absolutely huge. And like I said, 11 5-star prospects. This really seemed like it's going to be a recruiting event that's hard to top for FSU moving forward. Maybe one of the best in years when you look at all the talent that was in Tallahassee. A couple of guys I didn't even mention. 5-star quarterback Michael Tolafeson, 5-star wide receiver Cameron Coleman, 5-star defensive lineman Camarion Franklin, 5-star defensive lineman Jamonte Waller, 5-star offensive lineman Mason Short, 5-star offensive lineman Zayden Walker, and 5-star defensive back DJ Pickett. Just so much talent in Tallahassee and Florida State. You can tell that their momentum, not only on the field, but also on the recruiting trail, is moving in the right direction. And this coaching staff, like I said, really good at connecting with these guys, and especially whenever they get them on campus, they really blow it out of the park. So it was very calculated. We talked about the Jermaine Johnson All-American Brick ceremony earlier. It was very calculated, I feel like, to have that ceremony kind of contend with this event, to kind of have them at the same time, to be able to have these recruits around there, to see that moment, to see how passionate Mike Norvell was for one of his former players to be honored like that. It had a lot of them talking about it coming out of the trip, like, hey, maybe I could have a brick one day myself. So, we'll see, but it seems like Florida State, it's still very early in the offseason, just beginning the spring, but where they're sitting in a lot of recruitments with top players across the country, Florida State is trending in the right direction. So we'll see if that continues over the next couple of months. Spring showcase in April is going to be another big opportunity, and then official visits, they'll start kicking off in June.
Woo, goodness gracious. Recruiting never stops.
Nope.
Casey is on here from Facebook asking about how about that recruit's mom tweeting that she finally heard what she needed to hear as a mother
Yeah.
while on the visit with us. And I
I
saw that
saw
tweet
that.
too, but I don't specifically know the recruit's name.
That's Armando Blount. He's a 2025 5-star defensive lineman who was actually on campus yesterday for quite some time, it appeared.
Man.
So,
Hmm.
Florida State, I mean, they're, like I said, top players in the country, whether it's the 24 class now or 2025, which, I mean, man, 2025 is looking insane with the amount of 5-star guys that just keep talking about Florida State. Now you can add Armando to the list. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna say if you're on the good side with mom,
it's where you want to be.
that's exactly where you want to be. That's exactly where you want to be. But it just so helps that it is a 5-star defensive tackle, which I believe the last time Florida State had one of those. Well, I mean, there's Marvin Wilson. Yes. But you could go back into one of my favorite players of all time, Timmy Jernigan. So, but yeah, I think that's going to wrap up this episode, about an hour and a half of this. Before you guys leave, though, it would definitely be appreciative. I would appreciate a ton if you hit that like button. It kind of helps us get this to more FSU fans, and it creates a better chat. It brings in more FSU fans to be able to bring up some topics that maybe you weren't thinking of, that maybe someone else could bring up, and we can give some answers to. So I appreciate everybody always coming on here and smacking that like button for us on YouTube. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, shoot, everywhere. We are at Knoll Game Day. Make sure that you guys are following the socials down below. This is our Twitters. Mine's at Logan's Twitty, and then Dustin's is over there at Dustin Lewis NG. Dustin and our guy Tommy on hand at practices for the rest of spring camp, which is going to be a fun one. So appreciate everybody listening in with us. We have full coverage coming on KnollGameDay.com. We also have our third episode with Brian Stork, former 2013 national champion and Remington Award winner and Super Bowl champion. I mean, I don't know what else, but a former coach, probably going to be a coach again, but we're going to have our third episode with him. We're hoping to share some more details on that very soon. So, yeah, I think that's going to wrap up the episode. Dustin, I appreciate everyone. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's week, and we will talk to you guys next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Peace.